Thanks, Maria. So we should put half of that. Next week, on the meeting. I like starting.
Yeah.
You don't put my these two words in the story.
Maybe.
Oh my goodness. Ready to go. Hello, everybody.
Let me open my agenda. Today is Wednesday, December 6, 2023. It's 4:02, and I call this meeting of the New Shoreham Town Council together to order. Today is a work session, and it arose out of, first of all, a number of questions that Molly asked during our annual licensing process, which I thought was immensely helpful. There are a lot of things we, at least in my experience, that we do because that's how we do them. And it's always worthwhile, I think, to sort of walk through the ordinances. We have Nick Salitro and James Callahan joining us. And I envision this as a meeting for Millie to walk through some of the stuff that we always do, and for us to interrupt, ask questions, and probably, I'm sorry, Nick and James, give you guys a fair bit of homework, because there's a lot of nexus in the liquor laws, as I seem to feel like I learn every year, between what the state statute tells you can do and what we might want to do. Or frankly, areas that they may have given municipalities more flexibility than they had when our ordinances were drafted. I mean, it's just as, it's equally possible that that's happened. So, you may hear a lot of James and Nick, and you guys look into that for us. But I think, as I was thinking about this meeting this afternoon, and I was thinking of the work that you guys did with Neil on parking, and when you started peeling back the old ordinances, there was a lot of updating that could be done. So anyway, Millie, I don't know if you want to start.
Do you want to go through the agenda? We have that licensing caps to start with, and I know that was something that, and potentially eliminating unused or unissued licenses. Yeah, Martha has been talking about that for a couple of different licenses.
Yeah, so that's the way I'd like to do it. Just go through the
very good. And Molly had asked me this earlier, and just about the having a license available, and Martha and I've kind of talked back and forth on this, and I'm just going by my memory, and this from the early 2000s sometime. We had something in front of the liquor control board, the DBR, and they came back and said that we had to have a license available in each category. So at that point, that's when we amended these liquor rules and regs to have that this grid right on the front page to include all of these licenses that seem to be anomalies. And I don't believe that we necessarily have to have those showing, but we do have to have those available, although I'm not sure what that looks like. One thing when talking about those caps, if we're keeping this grid on here, I think it makes sense for us to also include the number of licenses that are issued in that. If this is a working document, it's helpful. I don't know if it really exists anyplace else besides, in our heads and counting and the files and stuff. So, but anyway, Martha, this essentially went on because of Martha.
My recollection, because we used to have this list and it didn't have everything listed. It had the ones that had been issued, and my understanding was always that it was, you had to grant one of any, if all of the applicant met all of the, qualifications, requirements. But I always felt listing them was, like advertising them. And I'm not even sure all of these would even apply to Block Island.
So if I can.
So that was the question that I had. I don't think there's any question that we'd have to issue one if somebody applied for it, but do we just have to make it more confusing than it is?
I don't think we have to issue, we have to have the category open. Is that, I mean,
yeah,
I guess that's a question.
If I know, my understanding has been, this is what's come up in the
Yeah.
past with a number of different places. If there's none issued in the town and somebody applies and they meet all of the requirements.
Statutory requirements.
Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to deny it. I think you have to have reason to deny it. So Millie, how does that?
Yeah, as I understand it, we have criteria in our rules and regs is for the reasons that you can deny.
Gotcha.
But some of them, for example, class E is a pharmacy license.
We've had that once.
No, but there's no pharmacy
There isn't now.
now.
Yeah.
So therefore, if one were to take it down, I'm not saying if one were to.
Yeah.
Somebody start the pharmacy, that's somebody, but
Yeah.
right now there's no pharmacy and I don't see that in the future.
Because that's what happened previously, when they weren't listed. If somebody came in, because that's the D license came in, the pharmacy license came in, the C license came in, those are the ones that I remember.
Because of statutory changes, in other words.
Because somebody realized they could
Right, right.
get in that way. And the reason, the only one that I've been advocating to get rid of is the class C, but that's later on.
So,
I guess the big question is. I mean, I know, I heard Millie, but I'm now checking for legal, like, have things been updated.
So Sven, James and I talked on this earlier, and obviously we weren't around over the who knows how many decades this document has
You
morphed.
weren't?
We weren't, Sven. And when I say around, I don't just mean as your attorneys. We may not have been living at the time.
Was that a comment to Martha?
I'll leave that for you. But the thought is, maybe it's an educated guess, that if you were to set the cap at 0 on a given license, that would act as an outright prohibition on that class in town that you may not, absent authority from the General Assembly, prohibit without considering an application. So to say, and I'm just going to pick a random letter, to say there are no class Ds allowed in town, or we're going to set our cap at 0 on class Ds. When you are sitting as a board of license commissioners, you have to hear the facts of each application and apply it to the law. If you're going to say the cap is 0 without even considering an application, that could violate due process of an applicant. So in short, legally, I don't, and James doesn't have a problem with you leaving the caps at 1. And in fact, by doing so, it may avoid a problem for yourselves down the road.
right.
Okay, I'm not making this myself clear here. My question is, do we have to list them at all? It's not to set the cap at 0, but do we have to list them at all? Because there are a whole lot of other licenses in the state that we don't list. Those wacky things that don't apply here, but
Sure.
nonetheless.
So I would say, I would encourage listing the licenses that the town is the issuing body for. So for instance, there isn't a class P license on here that deals with caterers, to the best of my recollection. And it's dealt with exclusively by DBR. It would have no business in your ordinances because you can't touch it.
Could I just,
Go ahead.
is that the one that somebody enrunted us with? Okay.
What class N?
that's the one that, what was it? I'm sorry.
Class P caterers, which is
That was the
regulated by
one that
DBR.
was picked up by somebody in town that had been denied a license. And they use that for a summer.
Yeah.
How do we get around things like that? I'm more,
Good question. There's litigation on that. There's case law on that. The short answer is the authority to govern a Class P lies exclusively with DBR.
why?
That's the authority that was granted by the General Assembly.
Can we just end that right now?
I wish I had the power, even though I do know somebody who has a part-time
Yes.
gig up there.
So in other words, keep this active public list is your advice of the ones that we issue.
Yeah, I'd leave it as is, and I understand the thought. Do we really want to advertise this? I would leave it as is. That's the short answer.
Great.
People figured it out before.
So one question maybe we should go through our list, not today, or Lily can do it, but just to make sure that if there are new ones. So I just noticed there's a Class N license, which is nightclubs, 200 to 10,000 people. I don't know. What does that mean versus there's at least one or two places that are 200 to 10,000 people. And would it be better to, I don't know the right way to phrase this, to segment some of those big places or not? But we don't even mention, and unless I'm getting it all messed up. So we should just go through it and make sure we have it.
my point.
I know, but I'm doing it a different way.
Yeah.
This license does seem to reference Providence, the N, but certainly we can look into all of them as well in the.
I just see it. With the definition I have is nightclub, primary source of revenue from alcohol, 200 to 10,000 person occupancy limit. And it could be a lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the
Detail.
at the actual citation in the
okay.
law, and it does say in the city of Providence,
Oh,
the license
sorry.
authorizes.
Okay. Sorry.
Isn't this,
But there might be more to it that says in other towns.
isn't there some other quirky
I know it
thing
does allow
about
other towns. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Providence?
There are many quirky
There's-
things about
There's
Providence.
something about Providence and the liquor board. I can't remember what it is.
So I don't know. I'm not sure.
Oh,
what you're referring
man.
to. Sorry. All right. Right. So we should look into adding N.
Probably have to start up again, look at the whole documents.
Great. I think that question was answered then. Thank you, Millie. We want to start on F and F1? Would that be jumping ahead too much?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Can
Scott.
I ask a question, and I don't know when the timing is, but I would like to figure out when and how we can bring to the voters a change to the charter about allowing closure of a facility should the police, fire, town manager need 24 hours. And it goes back to the Providence law that I know Dylan's very familiar with. He wrote it. And I'm mentioning it now with liquor because the last instance we would have done it regarded liquor. And so it's basically a pause moment where you can close the facility for 24 hours. You have that ability to be able to recollect.
Great.
And I just want somewhere between Millie, Marianne, and Keith, and Nick and James.
Let's make sure we bring that up under C,
Okay.
because I think that's an amendment we should really look at.
Okay.
You know.
Hold on, we skipped the whole Class C thing.
That's right there. And we're that's the first item there, Martha.
But the Class C that I've been talking about is separate and apart from listing them on the
Right.
regulation. It's the law that one of you cited at the last meeting. It's the Coventry, South Kingston, and Situate, where they don't have Class C licenses under the general laws.
So that is item A, and it is mentioned there. You can certainly talk about that at this time. eliminating the licenses. And then that would be something that you would petition the legislature for. So it would be become part of your legislative agenda if the council so chose.
And the reason, for the people who didn't have to listen to me talk about this last year, that, the Class C license is a very narrow tavern license. It's only been used in this town as under the, you have to issue one of each license. And it's been 3 times to my knowledge, I think it's 3 times. And it always comes back to a full liquor license a few years later. And I don't see any reason why. I think everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows it's what I call the foot in the door license. And why don't we just start out with the liquor license? What people are ultimately going to be asking for anyway. And I don't think anybody's ever represented that they weren't. It's just, it just seems like a silly, unnecessary step. And Millie, I cannot find. You gave it to me.
Yeah, I have it here if you want to. It just says there is a provision in the law that allows Coventry, Situate, and South Kingstown to prohibit by ordinance the issuance of a Class C license. So if it was something that you guys were interested in doing, you would then petition the legislature to add New Shoreham just to that list, and then you would go ahead with it forward with an ordinance to prohibit them if you see fit.
And they prohibited them for what reason? Just to eliminate a license, or?
No, you don't eliminate a license that exists. You eliminate the issuance of more licenses. If there was one if there was one that existed, they had the option to turn over to a regular full license, and otherwise there would be no more issued.
Yeah,
No, I understand that, but was that all they were solving for? Did they have another
it
issue?
says they shall issue a Class B license as to the holders of all Class C licenses in those towns. So but that's just what they were doing with their end run. But there isn't any description as to why they wanted to do that.
Neil, from what I've seen, different towns have different, like in Cranston, they're only showing that they issue A, B, E, F, F1, J, B, C, and D. So like the J license is for a convention hall. So I think we could this is where we could say, we don't have a convention hall. We also don't want a convention hall.
So
We don't see any reason why we need to have a liquor license for something that may not even be provided for in our zoning code. I'm not sure. I don't know the zoning code that well. So let's see, in Cranston, like Westerly doesn't offer all of them. But they also limit them. So like when we get to discussing the F license, so my conversation with the man at Department of Business Regulations, he indicated that he's like, you guys are the liquor board, or, a lot of towns have a separate liquor board. Here we are the liquor board. And he said, you get to decide the parameters of that one. So that's what he said. I don't know whether maybe Nick and James would have a different interpretation of that. It looks like a lot of towns have done just that, because in Westerly, they've limited it to five licenses per year per organization. And other towns have other regulations, and other towns have a specific form for that.
Can we take just to sort of step back a little bit? So let's take J as an example. Is for a convention hall. Would we have to beseech the legislature to no longer offer a Class J license? I would say yes, right? Oh, yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
We have assembly halls. I don't know how. how that's defined.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, I'm not sure we don't have. This is great.
I don't know.
I mean, just for reference, convention is defined as a banquet, political rally, trade show, exhibition, charity ball, or other similar gatherings. So it's not just like a big,
Right, right.
Right, for which the Spring
It's
House.
not a convention center. It's-
right. It could be a tent really, which I think you might have out there at some point.
Yeah, yeah, right.
But I think all of those licenses are covered, all of those events are covered under the license of the property holder. Anything that we have under a tent. Except for the ones that are.
What category does Sullivan House have?
They have a Class P license,
Class
which is
P?
which is issued by the DBR. Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's the caterer's license.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Right. So we need to decide whether we want to request from the legislature that, say, Class C and Class J be something that New Shoreham is not required to offer. On the Class C, I would just say, and I don't know whether this is where Neil was going, but I think we need a better rationale than we considered a training wheel license and we don't, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't honestly, only because and the only reason I pulled C out was because I found this originally because I was looking to see if there was a mechanism under which a town could not have a liquor license.
right,
And this I just stumbled on. I didn't
Yeah,
know it existed.
yeah.
And it is a license that has, I mean, we can get the background of the licenses have been listed here and what has happened to them and how long they have or have not lasted as Class C licenses. They're extremely limited. They are packaged food only. Is it packaged food or snack food or? It's a very limited menu.
Yes, it's a very limited menu. It has to be prepackaged foods only, and you know, they have a strange list of foods in the law.
I mean, even seems like something that wouldn't be a good balance of food and liquor. I mean, it doesn't seem, it goes, all of the liquor laws in the state of Rhode Island go back to when the Volstead Act was repealed. And nothing much has changed.
I guess I'm curious, Keith. I mean, does anybody have a goal of trying to limit the number of licenses, like number of liquor establishments, if that's a word? Because I don't necessarily, I'm more of a market supply guy, but I mean, to go and appeal to the legislature, bring this up, and I'm thinking about our senator.
I wasn't advocating for that because
I mean, I just don't see what there's.
It became clear to me just in this meeting, well, not just in this meeting, it clarified for me that really, if we want to change or eliminate classes from consideration here, we need legislative approval to do that. And what I was saying is we would need to decide as a group whether that was something that we wanted to do.
Thank you.
And one of the reasons that this is the only one I brought up is because there is precedent for it in 3 towns already.
Mm-hmm.
They just.
Yeah, there was the other one that the Empire Theater tried to get a few years ago. That was
Well, they made noises.
yeah, indeed.
Well, they had a Class T. The one they would apply for was the historic, but they didn't,
Nonprofit theaters.
historic.
There are 2 classes in that
And he didn't
statute,
go
actually,
there.
Martha.
Yeah.
One is nonprofit theaters. Then there are exceptions for certain towns that have for-profit theaters.
That was Newport.
Newport.
Yeah. That was.
Yeah, in Burrillville. So we would have to get our name added to
Yes.
that in order to allow that, but there
Yeah.
wasn't the enthusiasm at the
Yeah.
time.
Well, I think it was more like, give us some, something other than I want. from the board.
Well, that was an issue. Good point.
But you know, just give us something to work with. Don't just say, I want this. And,
I think the biggest question I have on this discussion is, what is an ancient underground comfort station?
it's in Providence. Don't worry about it.
Just saying.
Doesn't it say in Providence?
Thinking about putting one of those in.
I want a Class L license.
It's, well, it's like,
Helping.
it's like the tavern that's been in continuous operation for 10 years before or after, was it 1763 or something?
17, that's under a different.
But that's it, there were a lot.
This, that's paid, please, one. This is 1913,
That's a comfort station.
continuous operation since 1913. Okay.
All right.
The White Horse Tavern is the other one.
Are we ready to move on to Fs and F1s?
So our takeaway here is that we are going to look into this legislatively.
I think when we talk about a legislative agenda, we should talk about whether there's, to use Millie's word, enthusiasm for going to the legislature and asking them to remove, to include New Shoreham as one of the towns that's exempt from the requirement to offer. I heard C and J. But
Well, C-
J
C-
sounds like we might meet,
C is the one that exists. J exists. Is there any statutory exemption for J?
I don't know. I can check. I've got it right here, but I don't know.
Find out why they didn't come into in Situate, if there was a problem.
So the F,
yes,
So are we looking now?
we're going to 1B.
I thought that,
Yes, the Fs.
okay, so I guess this is where I have questions for Nick and James about what is your understanding of the parameters here? Like what I see that other towns are doing are kind of all over the board. So some of them are still like, so this category changed recently, like recently being within the last couple of years, to include commercial businesses. It used to be just nonprofit, religious, and political events, so now apparently includes for-profit, but not all towns have adopted that. Some towns on their forms, it just says, I don't know whether they haven't changed it, or whether they made the decision to not change it, whether it just wasn't changed, or did they actually purposely not change it? Like, what's your understanding of this?
So I wouldn't go by their forms in what they say. Yes, it was changed. Yes, it allows commercial ventures these days. As far as what you can do with a Class F, I would fall back on what is the authority of a liquor license board or commission, which is the reasonable control of alcoholic beverages. That's what the case law says on this subject matter. And I might be better able to answer it if you tell me what are the council's thoughts? What do we want to do with Class F licenses?
I can give you my sense on Class F and my interest in Class F. I sort of, we've had a few, 2 real applications and 1 potential application on Fs. And it struck me that it felt like we didn't have a lot of rules to go by around when, sort of what are the thresholds that an applicant would need to meet. you know, for example, Persephone was here, wanted to do something for at her place for the night market. And because we know her, I had great faith that she would, do the right thing. But that's not the basis for issuing a license that you sort of, you know what I mean? You know, we went through this on a something similar on a mobile food establishment a few years ago, you know, where, I mean, to me, there ought to be some bright lines around that. You ought to, you know, I'm not advocating for this necessarily because I haven't clarified my thinking, but is it only a few times a season, for example, or is it, you know, a limited drink menu, or is it only associated with another event, or you know what I mean? Like I don't. It seems like it seemed to me, and this may be on me for not really spending a great deal of time on it, but it seemed like, yeah, I mean, we're fine with Persephone doing this. She'll probably do a good job, which I was very comfortable with, and they did do a good job. But it just seemed like a rather subjective kind of an approach to this license. That was my feeling.
Yes, I would agree. Millie, who else, just off the top of your head, have applied for F1 in the past 5 years?
It used to be like before COVID, it was most of the nonprofits. And I think at that point it wasn't allowed to be a for-profit license. I think it changed in 2019. So it was the steak fry, they would get one, the Lions Club,
Society,
the Historical Society,
yes,
the Lions Club, Clam Bake, those things were the only ones. But then they opened it up to for-profits. And I think that we issued 1 or 2, maybe like to the Blue Dory or the Avalon to do a wine tasting and oyster shucking event. But there have been very few. This is the first year that we saw.
Concert Fest, right, went under this license?
Yes, yes, it did. Concert Fest won this license as well this year.
The Persephone, I think, was the first that had a whole string of dates.
So
Really,
I'm sorry, was Concert Fest under this or an Ocado?
I actually, I don't remember. I shouldn't.
I
speak on
think they
it.
did it under this, under F. No, not under F.
they might have been under the Narragansett.
So
Oh,
my
maybe.
question here really revolves around, like we know the parameters of what we can do, right? My conversation with the man at Department of Business Regulations, okay, so most of my questions to him ended in, you're gonna have to ask your lawyers. So I just want to frame it that way, but he seemed to lead me to believe that the Board of, Liquor Board,
Yeah.
us, could alter this a little bit if we could modify it to our town, that this is what they allow with, like, this is it, you can't go beyond this, but that we could limit it to less. And I'm wondering, I'm gonna ask my lawyers if they think that that's like how you're interpreting it too, or should we talk to them again?
You mean limit it in terms of restrictions when you issue a license, like an F1 license, or are you talking about?
Okay, so like in here, right, it says that for the, let's see, F1, issuing authority may, in its discretion, permit applicants to file a single annual application for issuance of up to 12 event licenses for a calendar year. And the authority may issue the licenses concurrently, provided that each event license shall state the specific event with which it's associated and collect the fees, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, what I'm asking is the language in here, it says that we may, at our discretion, permit up to 12. right?
Right.
So is this where we can say,
It's
but we're
separate.
gonna limit it to 3?
You
We're
could,
gonna
yeah.
say, you know,
to
Lions
your
Club can only
discretion.
have 3, the Catholic Church can only have 3, you know, a coffee shop can only have 3. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you can, but you have to provide some kind of support or, basis for that, or make it,
Right.
like you did this summer. You say, try for the first 3 weeks, see how it goes, and come back to us. If it doesn't go well, we're going to limit it. If it does go well, we'll extend it.
And
I
I'll,
think
I'll
it's
give you an
important.
example, Molly, just to jump in. Say there's a place close to a residential zone. You might say to an applicant who asked for 12 of these licenses, that's too much near a residential zone. It's affecting health, safety, and welfare of the public in that area. However, we think that 2 is more palatable and consistent with the well-being of the community there. To dovetail off what James is saying, because you're sitting in the capacity as a board, you have to look at the evidence in the application and apply it to the law. So it's tough, and you're getting the famous lawyer answer of it depends, but it truly does depend on the exact facts of a given application, what you can do with that and the problems that it presents and how the board is going to deal with those particular problems.
Can I follow up on that, Nick?
Sure.
Does it, that just raised a question in my mind, whether it would be worthwhile in our ordinance to establish that the liquor board may limit the number of F1s that it issues, number of F licenses that it issues, or does the statute already enable that so we don't need to establish that in our ordinances?
I don't think the language makes a difference. If there's a reason to say no to an application, you can say no to an application.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm just saying, like, worst case scenario, right? Like, so now this is out here. I'm going to tell you that I get into a lot of conversations over this. Lots of people contacted me, I don't know about you guys, when we issued these licenses. And majority of them were not pleased, right? So,
Why not?
Right.
well, obviously people didn't talk to you about it, but what I would say is, people are like, well, if you're going to have like every gift shop and okay, I'm talking. So if every gift shop and every coffee shop and every business is going to apply for these licenses, like, are we going to be having wine tastings at gift shops? And are we going to be having wine tastings at coffee shops and breakfast cafes? And, where does it begin? Where does it end? That's what I'm just saying, worst case scenario.
Mhm.
That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's what triggered it for all of us.
Yeah.
The last request that
Yeah.
ended up being pulled.
Yeah.
Who are we gonna have now everybody trying to do this in their business?
Right.
What was the last one?
Ghost tours. That actually fits with what I was saying, which is
It was a bar crawl.
the challenge, it seems to me, is we might all be okay with, say, Persephone, not to pick on her doing one, but would we be okay with every shop on Dodge Street and Water Street every Thursday night?
What happens next year when someone feels like, well, I'm on Dodge Street, I wanna do it.
Right.
And we have 2 of them,
Yeah.
both,
But-
you know.
But so one of the things, and Nick, kick me under the figurative table here. We do have the ability, the liquor board does have the ability to say, we don't think it would be appropriate to have 2 of these on Dodge Street
Right. And the other thing to stress,
because
There's
of public
there's some-
health and safety.
Right. There's some additional guidance in the DBR regulations on this. These are special events. This isn't a regularly occurring thing. It should be the exception to the rule, not the norm. So I think it might have been Sven who just mentioned, every Thursday or what have you. That's not what it should be. It's a rarity where this should be coming up.
But that's what we had before us with Persephone.
It's every Tuesday, in fact.
Right, but I want to echo what Nick is saying,
Yeah.
because that is what the man from Department of Business Regulations said to me too. And then I wasn't able to find that language again, but sort of said to me, he was like, this is supposed to be for an irregular event, not
Right.
regularly. So he said, you're telling me that you gave a license out that was for the same day at the same time every week. So he's like, you want to rethink that.
Gotcha.
Because he said it's the one-time thing. So actually the second license that didn't end up coming before us fit the criteria
Better
more
than.
closely than the
Right,
one that we
yes.
issued. So
Right.
that's the only reason I was saying, like, you know, I think everything went well. It
Yeah.
just doesn't fit the criteria.
But it
Right.
goes back to what my argument's been about people who don't qualify for a regular license, slipping around and ultimately, but I see this coming back next summer.
Sure, I mean.
Why
I mean,
not?
If we extend, if we extend it to its illogical conclusion, theoretically, someone could apply for an F1 license for every night of the summer. You know?
Well, they have, I think they have to have food.
The only difference is that it says it's 12 licenses per calendar
Right,
year.
right,
It makes
you
me
could-
think it's like once per month. But in your situation, the summer season lasts about 12 weeks. So most people are going to say,
Yeah.
oh, a party
Yeah,
every
great point,
Thursday night.
James, yeah. Yeah,
James, also on the F1, is a premises mandatory?
That it be issued.
Yes. No, it says consumption on the premises.
Well, that's correct.
Well, no, but I'm not on ghost tours.
No,
I'm just making sure the premises is part of that officially.
It appears so. A retail consumption on the premises where sold for a period of 19 hours.
Yeah.
It does infer that it's on a specific lot or piece of property.
so just to play this out to some extent to Molly's point. So Persephone's comes next Memorial Day and says there are 12 Dodge Street night markets and we want an F1 license for each of them. The answer is that doesn't fit with the criteria in the statute.
Well, it
We
does. It does, but it doesn't restrict it that way. I think what you're saying is right, but it doesn't say you can't have 12 days in a row or 12 weeks in a row or 12 months in a row. Doesn't delineate that.
But I think the language Molly was referring to made it almost sound like a special event is not a recurring event.
Right.
Right,
That's not what the regulations.
Well, he
I
actually said
appreciate
to,
it, but
he
it's not-
actually said to me that sounds like someone who should apply for a liquor license.
But
They're-
still,
they're
as long as
skirting around.
it fits in the criteria. I mean, I appreciate the perspective, but it's
Mhm.
not right.
So, you know, when it says they can apply for up to 12, so like if you take, let's just say you take like the Rotary Club for an example, right? You know, like they might have like a pancake breakfast 1 month and a like, you know, Blessing of the Fleet and a golf tournament, and they have a different thing going every month and they want to apply for it. I mean, you can only have a total of 18 hours, so it's not really the ideal license for something like that. But anyway, you wouldn't. I guess that's what they're saying. It's not reoccurring. If you're trying to avoid a specifically reoccurring thing, you don't want it to be the same time, same, you know, same bat channel, same bat time. You know, like it's got to be a little variety there.
I
I guess I'm a little confused, James or Nick. So it's because the perfect example that is Persephone. So what did we grant? 8 licenses or so. Let's just say there's 12 weeks this season. She requests in Memorial Day, she wants to do one for every week for 12 weeks at the event, which is Dodge Street Marketplace. Would you say that's allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
And Neil, I get your confusion because it's written in a confusing manner by the amount of licenses that one can get, up to 12. By definition, with a 12-month calendar year, if you're to have one a month, that sounds like a regular event to me. So your point isn't lost that even though on the one hand we're hearing this isn't a regular occurrence, by definition it is if you can have 12 licenses and spread them out over a year. So you're not alone in that thought.
Millie, for down on Mansion Beach, for a house that has a lot of weddings, what licenses have they been getting?
They've used a caterer's license.
They just do it.
Well,
They-
they use a caterer, a licensed caterer.
And
But in,
doesn't the person have to buy the alcohol?
I,
They used to.
that's a licensed caterer. I'm not sure. With a class F1, they have to buy it at retail.
That used to be the case with the caterers down there. I haven't done that work for 20 years, but that's what it was.
But if it's a wedding without a cash bar, it's a non-event, right? You don't need a license. If you're not charging for it, and most weddings out here are not cash bars, I'm sure there are some. Do you need a license?
I think we're going a little
Yeah.
far afield. Because I don't know anything about
Yeah.
caterers licenses. So
Okay.
you can.
Yeah. Because they're, yes. I want to say that because Persephone's was the example this summer, we've been talking about Persephone. I actually think they did a wonderful job. This is not to pick on them, but to sort of talk about more broadly the policy around F1s and making sure that we have the tools that we need if we decide that one or more are potentially problematic. And I take it, Nick and James, that you would walk us through that.
What if we were to do something like, just tell the applicants, set a policy where we're only going to approve them once a month, so that, so procedurally, we wouldn't end up with a situation where, let's say we approve, if we were to approve, 8 for one business on one street, and then the following meeting, we've got another application for somebody who wants 8 on the same street or on a different street, or, I think it would be difficult for us to look at this holistically when we've given it out piecemeal. So maybe it might be easier if we set a policy where we say, well, we're going to approve these once a month for the following month. And then we can look at them and maybe we have 20 of them, right? I'm just saying I'm really going worst case scenario here. And we may just collectively say, well, 20 is too many and we're going to pick 5. Like, do you know what I'm saying? If we just say, we don't want alcohol being served everywhere all the time without, what is that? What do you think about that? Looking at it more at like a month by month basis.
I actually think we had it right with Persephone's this year, the way that we approached it, which is it was a new thing. We said, I think you get 3 and then come back to us with the next 3.
There's one
No?
one of the
And
fact.
I happen to think that was, as a licensing board, we had no experience with commercial operations getting those types of licenses. Didn't want to have it turn into a street party, and took a pretty measured approach. And I would think that if, for example, I don't know, the lazy fish, or
Well, I'm gonna just say I have a real high discomfort level with actually using real names of places. Cause
okay,
as
yeah.
a business owner, I wouldn't want a liquor license to be like my name attached to it all the time. It would raise my anxiety, but, but I know what you're saying, you, like a retail shop.
Okay, another.
No, well, could I say something, please?
Yes.
There's a big differential with Persephone's because Persephone's is an established food service place.
Mhm.
And I think that doesn't seem to be a factor in the law between a retail shop and a what do we call Persephone's? A breakfast,
shop.
lunch, coffee place, a food service place. That and I think isn't that should be a really important piece of this. We don't want people just wandering around drinking without I think food's really important if you're drinking. It should be available at least. And that does not seem to be a component in the F1. I mean, I know the only experience I have is with the historical, and that's always with we have one event and there's always food.
So just to ask Nick, if we wanted to have our own criteria in F1, and I'm going to follow Martha's thing, you need to, be a food establishment, for example. We could do that as criteria for issuing, right?
I wouldn't call it your own criteria. I would say you consider each application. You have the authority to reasonably control alcohol. I don't know if food is the best example, but I think a better example is maybe a police detail. Say you were concerned that there's a large event and you had a safety concern and were to require a police detail for that special event. That's a completely reasonable condition that you could impose.
So just certainly not to speak for Sven, but the question I have is, I think, similar to Sven's, which is, could we establish rules of that type that don't bother applying for an F1 if there's not food involved, for example?
Food, I'd have to think about.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
That's the idea. This is not Final Jeopardy. I just think these questions come up and worth asking. If you wanted to build some sort of a policy construct around these things, or discipline around the way that we think about them, that might be one.
On the other side of it, I have a problem with a one size fits all policy, because your role, your duty as a board is to look at the facts and circumstances of each application. And just to carte blanche say, all right, across the board, we're not doing this, you may run into some problems.
Except that we are guided by the policy making of the town council or the state statute.
State statute.
Yeah. Yeah, this is.
Can I take a little bit?
Please,
more on that?
yeah.
So Nick, I hear you and the cautions, but if one were to say, the commission really doesn't want to have more than 2 F1s on Dodge Street, or 2 on Water Street, or 4 in the commercial area, whatever, sort of build the policy rubric. You're saying that wouldn't be okay, or it could be okay?
No, it could be okay. I would encourage there to be evidence in the record at the hearing as to why that's a problem. The one that jumps to mind is we have a limited police force. Maybe we don't have the ability to police that. But as a board, we create a record that's subject to appellate review. We would need all that evidence, again, on a case-by-case basis in the record, which it's no surprise why we have our police chief at these meetings, so that if input is needed from him, he's there ready, willing, and able to provide testimony that's sworn on the record.
But the reality is, we're talking about small places. The place that we had last summer is not a large place. It's not going to have hordes of people. They're just not going to fit. I mean, physically fit. And the other retail spaces in the downtown area are not large.
So one of the things that is very helpful about this conversation for Nick and James is I find it very helpful to be reminded that that the liquor board does have pretty wide discretion, provided there's a rationale
Yes.
to make decisions about particular applications. The number of F1s, for example, that we might grant. The fact that Persephone's was the first through the door, or excuse me, a coffee shop was the first through the door, and whatever got their 12 F1s might lead us to a different conclusion on the next one. And that's okay.
Right.
Because we can, you raise the most important issue, which is we don't have enough police potentially. Interesting. All right. I don't think we resolved it.
What did we solve?
Nothing.
So.
I didn't know that we were here to solve things. I thought these were issues that we've had a lot of questions about, and I thought maybe we could ask them in this forum. Fine, let's move on to 1C. New Shoreham liquor rules and regulations review for potential amendments.
Well, no. So, I mean, so I'd like to.
I thought you were just saying I was moving to 12.
No, but I'd like to be able to give an answer that when, to Molly's point, if someone approached me and says, why are we giving out F1? I'd like a concrete answer that it has to go case by case, what I'm hearing, that there has to be a rationale to not allow it. And it's gonna be, as people come forward, there is no way to put parameters around it proactively. Is that accurate?
That's what it sounds like Nick and James's advice is, that we're better off establishing conditions or accepting or rejecting particular applications based upon evidence that we put in the record.
Yes.
So you think we can set conditions
Yes.
In the moment, like as they
Right.
are.
or ahead of time or in the moment?
I would do it in the moment. Based on each applicant.
Okay.
There is a short list of criteria in the rules and regulations
Right.
from DBR that I did provide you that,
Yes.
or that are on clerk base that you can look at
Yes.
about adequate police control and sanitary facilities and that kind of thing.
Right. Thank you. All right, 1C, New Shoreham liquor rules and regulations review for potential amendments. Does anybody have any? I just have one.
So I went through this with a fine tooth comb, and not that I want to belabor anything here. And there seems to be quite a few things that, I mean, we are going to be rewriting a little bit of it. That's going to come to hearing on the 8th
Right.
regarding the fire safety.
Yes,
But I feel like this needs to just get cleaned up to kind of more accurately reflect some process, and also just to make it a little bit more of a readable document. So I have some changes, and I don't know if they're really substantial, and if the best thing to do is to maybe put up draft document in front of you with showing those changes, and then kind of go from there, as opposed to kind of going through them one by one.
I think it would be very helpful for you and if you need to, you and James and Nick to put together sort of a marked up, and then we can put it on an agenda. We can have the conversation around, you know, why you suggested particular things. If that works for you, Millie. And if people agree, I mean, I'd rather start with words than start with concepts. I think this is a good time. One of the things when we were going through the liquor permits this year, it's very clear that we have quite a, I don't think inappropriately, we have a situation where, say, there's a hotel that has a liquor license and its de facto everyday liquor service area is this, but they draw a line, there's a line drawn around an entire property to be the liquor service area. It strikes me that we ought to, and presumably we can do this pursuant to a condition, say, look, your day-to-day service area is here. If you want to serve over there, you got to come to us or go to the chief of police or go to the town clerk and have rules, you know, make sure that they're comfortable that you have the controls necessary to keep people from walking out of the event with open containers. You have worked out with the police department, you know, notice of when the event's going to be in, when it's going to end, you know, what it's going to be like, so that there's a public safety sign up, you know, those sorts of things. It just, I think, and I think it was Molly who was raising, well, you have your parking lot and your liquor service area, you know, and that to me cries out for not so much trying to keep people from serving alcohol on their property, but having, you know, where you have whatever, an acre of land, your service area is actually 800 square feet, but you've got your service area as your entire property.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that,
I don't even think like the parking lot wasn't even, certainly that was bad, but secondarily, some of them, they have like that by circling their entire property, they're claiming service area or consumption area. They weren't defining which was which, like way out of the sight line of the server.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that's not controlled.
So,
well,
Yeah, go ahead.
we just have to make the rules a little bit clearer. I thought they were more clear than they are. I think what people were doing was defining the property, which they're supposed to do. But then it slipped and they didn't define the area of consumption and the area of service.
We just need to do.
And that's all. We just put that in the regs and say, this is what you have to do. And this is what has to be on your map. And that's what we should have. That's because it says service or consumption. And it's supposed to be service and consumption aren't supposed to be the same thing.
right.
Right.
So-
And the whole property was being outlined because we asked them to outline the property.
I think, Martha, we should definitely do that, and really, hopefully for next year, we can have it total property, service and consumption areas, and you have to find them in color or whatever it is. But I think the beach house was a really interesting example where they said, well, yes, we're including it because we may have special events up there. And we don't have an easy, well, doesn't seem to me, we have an easy vehicle to have them allow for a wedding up on the hill, you know, which would be more of a they don't want to come for a special event license, I don't think, but how do they do that? And I think that is sort of where
Yeah.
you were really going. That's the easiest example.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think we should come up with a way of saying, hey, here's your service area, here's your consumption area. And then whether it's a third area or if they have to notify the police and Millie, I don't know what the right guideline is,
Yeah.
but something more than
So
we may go up on the hill, or we may not.
if we could develop something that is like a special event license, but for a liquor, like a liquor license
Well,
holder,
it-
because there were several
Mhm.
that were kind of like, but we might, you know, and I can understand that, right?
Yeah.
But if you feel that, you know, you want to use this other area that's not in the approved service or consumption area, then you just apply.
Come back
Like,
to
it
us.
should be just a paperwork thing and a quick thing, not like hopefully just with the clerk's office and the police department, not us. You know, they have a liquor license. If they want to have this special event, you know, a wedding or whatever it is, they should be able to, if they can prove to the police, I don't know.
No, I think you're on
be
the
able
right
to
track.
try that,
Yeah.
that they can control the area, that the service is gonna be, you know, a specific number of people, right? You know, we don't wanna have open-ended things.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like Champlin saying, we'll close the road when we're holding an event down there, so we don't have the risk of patrons walking on that driveway, right? So in theory, the way I looked at Lark was they could basically say, we're gonna have the event on the hill, we're gonna close parking, there's no parking back there for, you know, from 6 to 10 or whatever. So I think that's a good point. It's an easy administrative process that we can make for them, so it's clear.
But I think there's some criteria on top of that, a little bit to everybody, a certified server, tip certified has to be in that area.
Well,
So I
that's,
just think we need. to
but that's all part of the liquor license.
Yes, but technically you could have a tip certified person in one part and not up the hill.
I think you have to have tips to be
That's
serving.
fine. If it is, I'm just trying to make sure that
Isn't
there's
it?
criteria.
I don't know.
That we
Is that
make that
granted?
part of this application.
Or, I like the idea of clerk or the police chief or make it simple.
So Millie and Nick and James, you're hearing a consensus around this and what we'd like to see in a draft. And by the way, it's perfectly fine to me if you say, listen, here's the kind of condition that I would suggest you put on all of these permits where there's a potentially significant gap between the service area and the consumption area. You know, maybe that's the basis for it. We're in your guys' hands on this.
Right.
We square? Thank you for doing all that work on that cleanup, Millie. Is there anything else on item C, letter C, or little C?
Well, I do think the map needs to be, the definition of what needs to be in the map needs to be defined.
And that's,
I thought we had done that. We didn't.
and are you working on that, Millie?
Yeah, I made note of that.
Yes, thank you.
The only other thing on C, you told me to bring it up.
Yes.
now, I guess,
Yes.
is, and if it's now or at some point. So very clearly for everybody, it may be listening, Providence has the ability to shut down an establishment for 24 hours to just a cooling period. And it's a police chief, I think it's police chief, town manager, and I don't know, something else. They have to agree on this. Hopefully we never, ever have a situation like that, but I would like to propose that we establish that. I think it has to be charter driven, and I think it has to be voted on by the folks. I want to make sure at the next opportunity, and we can just use Providence's language, that we build that into our charter, and I don't want to see that passed by.
Is it charter or is it legislation?
I believe the
This
way.
came up last year.
Yes, Sven has brought this up a number of times, and did a lot of research on it. And my recollection, Sven, I'm sorry, yours is probably clearer than mine, is that Providence has this, look, you're shut down for 24 hours while we figure this thing out. And the root of that is in their charter. And I would just ask Nick and James if you could look into that for us and get a sense of whether we can do it and what that needs to look like.
And James, just so you know, Dylan was a source to me on that because he did most of that work, and now you guys are chummy on 6061, so you can just continue that conversation.
Definitely.
Terrific, thank you. Thanks for remembering that, Sven. All right, item number 2 is outdoor entertainment license ordinance. Millie put this in front of us, and
Yeah, and I only put that, I believe that's what I had gathered from some of your conversations, that you wanted to review this. I know that, actually, I do want to mention one thing about outdoor entertainment. There isn't, and this came up once before. We had an application, you had an application in front of you that didn't go forward for one reason or another, but it was an application for a residential area. And so there is no zoning, zoning doesn't govern outdoor entertainment at all. So like we found out with the MFEs, there's not a permitted use area or non-permitted areas for these. So essentially, you could apply for an outdoor entertainment license in the residential A zone out on the neck, Sven's house.
right.
But you could or you couldn't?
You could, of course, you could apply for anything. I mean, whether you guys would choose to grant that or not, I'm sure that you could find criteria reason for not. But I'm just saying that the zoning ordinance does not prohibit it in any areas.
And just so that I'm clear, we're drawing a bright line between an outdoor entertainment license, which presumably is an ongoing thing, and a special event license where someone might have a wedding.
And those are
somewhere.
two very different
Right.
licenses.
Yes. Just wanted to clarify that further.
Yeah.
So for me, the idea of an outdoor entertainment license being issued to a place, well outside of the commercial boundaries seems to be something that unless someone can point me to a situation where it might work, I
will. And
Yeah,
and
please.
that is the Block Island Club. So you could easily make an argument. I'm not saying nobody has done this, but I'm just saying there is an establishment like that where they could say, hey, we want to have electric guitar every Saturday night, and people come for a picnic. And if you were a neighbor, that may not, or the O'Toole's would have an opinion.
Yeah.
So I just think there are places that was really the example.
Right.
Not many.
Which sort of begs the question.
Sullivan House.
Is that
Sullivan House, Postcard Station. I mean, there are places.
right? That's sort of why the Sullivan House is why I'm trying to draw a bright line between a wedding, a special event, and a license to always be able to have outdoor entertainment.
And the Sullivan House does carry an outdoor entertainment license, which makes sense because they are doing.
Do they? Gotcha.
Many
Yeah.
events.
I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think we should limit it to by area? I mean, they all come before us.
They all come before you. It
So,
hasn't been an
yeah.
issue before. It was
Yeah.
just raised, it was raised to me by the land use or the zoning official.
Yeah.
Can we come back to this in a second? If
We
you
can
don't
do
mind?
what we can do whatever your heart desires.
So, because I think you're gonna link in a minute. So where I really want to have this discussion, and I don't want to have it around the big establishments that many people have talked about noise, is there are some places now that seem to be having outdoor entertainment, and it's almost becoming like the new big open sign, right? There's a way to attract people because you hear noise, so therefore, oh, there must be a bar up there or something like that. And I don't want to, necessarily pick on anybody, but because of the way the island works, because of the way things work, you can hear an amplified guitarist, singer, all far, far away from that establishment.
Mhm.
And I guess my question is that what we want? I mean, we did a number of outdoor entertainment licenses right by the bookstore or, at hotels in mixed use. And I don't know whether there's a way to say, hey, these are amplified areas and these are non-amplified areas. Which sort of gets to the
Interesting idea. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, or this is, I mean, Nick and James, you don't really want to say, Fred, you get it, Sarah, you don't, or, Jane, you do, Bob, you don't. But are there ways to create zones? And I'm picking amplification as a device that sort of say, hey, in this area that you can have amplified music, in these areas you can't unless by a special exception or something. And it can just get to be very loud.
So a couple things come to mind. So outdoor entertainment licenses are limited by time, right? So outdoor ends at 9 o'clock. Is that right, Bill?
Yes.
And it was something I was going to bring up. So good segue. So when you look at limitations, Section 8, 252, Section C says the limit projection sound, any amplification or projection of sound should be inwards toward the building, not outwards toward properties. Almost no one does that. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I can pick the ones who do it right. So the National points it toward their building. It's the way they're set up. Most are pointing them outward to draw attention, to draw to where their guests are seated. So that's one thing we aren't enforcing, right, as of this year. And then we have a decibel level that we are now enforcing, which I think the bigger ones that have had problems, we saw much more controlled once there was a repeatable enforcement of it, tracking. And that then brings along with it the right for us to pull the license back the next time they ask, right? Or revoke a license when they're repeat offenders on. So I'm not disagreeing with you on the end, but I think we have some controls in place around enforcement that we're good. We started to get better at it. I think we can even get better at it to control some.
Well, that we should enforce what we have before we go on to other. I agree though, because we had that woman here at one meeting and she had an issue with like the amplified piano at one of the hotels that she could hear. And I'm going to say my hearing is terrible. I couldn't even hear my own septic alarm going off yesterday. And yet
that's more dangerous than an electric guitar.
When she said that, I was like, that's why I keep hearing the piano in my backyard. So I could hear that, but I just couldn't figure out where that was coming from. I didn't know you could amplify a piano. So noise is suggestive, is subjective, right? That didn't bother me, but it bothered her. So it shouldn't be that it should be turned, the amplification should be turned in, then neither one of us are going to hear it.
I never bought into that.
It points in.
Yeah.
I'm not
It
either because
bounces
it bounces
off
off
the
of our wall.
I know.
Well, we should try it.
We've been trying it.
I know because they haven't been doing it.
Been enforced.
That was,
Because it bounces off the walls.
well,
Yeah.
I don't know, Martha, but let's see if it does bounce off the wall.
It does, I know it does.
But
I mean, you can say you don't know, I'd say I know.
So, but I think a good example is
I went through this at the spring house.
the Valley or whatever you want to call it, but the Atlantic, for
Yep.
example, the music points out, the music's just carrying straight down. Spring House, to a lesser extent, probably does as well. But again, I think if it was pointed the other way, I don't know if it carries uphill as well. And wind blowing, you got factors involved, but I do think addressing some of it and seeing how it goes, and then if we're not satisfied with the existing stuff, then we can look at decibel levels to lower decibel levels through ordinance changes, and that I don't think that's where we need to go right now, but.
Well, I think this also came up with Harbor's department when they were saying that there's an establishment in the harbor that has all their speakers pointing out to the harbor. So their music is going out. So this is a factor. And
Well, so the damn cannon that I hear at my house.
okay, well, then that's another
And
issue.
every horn that goes off in that harbor.
I don't even know who does it. Who does it?
Oh, that's
The general.
But
That's the vote.
but it is
Take
something
three
we
out.
should address, right? Because then if we could address the
Yeah.
speakers that are you know, projecting music out over the harbor, it would just take it down a notch.
But that's an interesting thing, I never, the nights I worked in town, I never heard that. When people complained about it. Canada. And if I'm at my house, down at Mansion, I hear it.
Millie, could we ask you to send to the outdoor entertainment license holders? And I'd be happy to draft this for you, a letter that's, that contains the language from section 8-252 limitations, and indicate to them that this will be a point of emphasis, this year. And see how that goes this summer. Is that, or next summer, not this?
It could, and instead of that, could we send them the whole thing and say?
We can do whatever you'd like, but I want to,
Point of.
yeah, that's great. Terrific. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say a little bit, Molly brought up somebody in, New Harbor, I think that's what you were talking about. And I remember every year the Elwells would come in, and that was a big discussion for them because they were listening to a bar at the end of a dock. And now with new ownership, it clearly changed, right? So setting things up, performance does affect it.
Yes.
And depending on what your objective is. I am a little worried about the speakers going in, of which at times traders did do that, because it would just bounce off a hard wall, and it was a little bit of echo chamber moment. But let's start with start with the first step.
Let's start with enforcing the one that we have, and yeah. Something else I was gonna say, but
I've heard bells, it depends on the wind.
okay, so, yeah.
Very frequently.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Anything else on this? Millie, thank you so much for all the work you do on this.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second, what?
Before everyone leaves, you just want to talk about the meeting, the executive session. And see the availability.
Yes. Should I do, before, don't leave. We have a motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it, we're adjourned.